Okay, there's one more thing I would like to go over, which is something I discovered when I was helping a student and I couldn't find their bug for about a half an hour. So I would like to try to save you some time with a pitfall that can happen in JavaScript. So let's say that I had a two-dimensional array and I wanted to sum up all the elements in the array. Now there's many different problems where this could happen, but here's a simple example where I can show that. So let me try to make a method called sum2darray that takes this in as a parameter and just sums up all the elements. Okay? So I've created the skeleton for that method here. And what I'll do is I'll say, okay, for I in, or I should say for I equals 0, I is less than array.length, I plus plus. And so this will go through all the rows. And let me make a helper method too. I'll say function sum rows, or I should say sum row. So I'll pass in the array and I'll pass in the row that I'm summing. And so let me make a variable, say sum equals 0, that I will return at the end. And what I will do is I'll say sum plus equals sum row, array, row I. So I'm going to go through each row, compute the sum of all the elements in that row, then accumulate those summed elements to the total thing. Okay, so going row by row, summing up each row. And so now I just have to fill in this here. So I'll say for I equals 0, I is less than arr at index row dot length, right? So in this case, I want to actually get the row. So I'm doing my classic two-dimensional array indexing. So I'll say here, I'll say row sum equals 0, row sum. Finally, I'm drilling all the way down into the array at this row, at this particular column. All right, and I'll return the row sum. So that is the idea. Now let me run this. I've set up a two-dimensional array that has the numbers 1 through 12 in sequence along rows. It's a 4 by 3 array. So let's have a look at what that does. So that printed out 6. Okay, that's already a little bit strange, right? Let me see if I... Okay, so that printed out 6. That's definitely not right. Okay, this is more than 6. Now let's see maybe something even worse. So if I say 13, 14, 15, let's add a row down here. I'll refresh this, and actually you notice it's locked up the browser here. It's gone into an infinite loop. So let's, so now it says, okay, the page is slowing down Firefox. So let's just hit stop here and get rid of this. Okay, so what I'd like to do now is back up to the example that wasn't throwing an infinite loop, but which was wrong. And I would like to go into the interactive debugger so we can see what's going on. So if I hit F12 or whatever on your computer, and I go to the debugger tab, then I can go to this file, bug.js, and I can set a breakpoint. So let me set a breakpoint right at the beginning of this method, sum2darray. And I will go ahead and refresh the page, and it will break there. Okay, so let me go to the local variables of this method. So in sum2darray, click in this. If I start to step over these commands, I now, whoops, yeah, let's see. I have, yeah, sum is equal to 0. And now I have the variable, should have the variable I on here. Okay, good. Now let me step into the sum row method. I go up here. If I look in the sum row method, let me just step through some of these things. Let me drag this up so I don't have to keep doing that. So I starts off at 0. So we add the very first element, which was a 1. So we see our row sum is 1. Then we go to the next element in the row, I equals 1. We sum that, our row sum is 3, so 1 plus 2 is 3. And then there's one more element in that row if I check. Yeah, so each row has 3 elements. So that should be a 3. And then I get the row sum of 6. Great, so now I'm finished with this. I break out of the loop. I return, and now I'm back here. And here's where we see the problem immediately. So we were supposed to just be summing the first row, right? But it tells me I is equal to 3. Well, how did that happen? So how did I suddenly, at the end of this iteration, I was 0 a moment ago, but now I is 3? What happened there? Well, so the problem is I never said let I. And so what happened here was I automatically became a global variable. This is one of the wonders of JavaScript. It's sort of like having a chainsaw. It's very powerful, but you drop the chainsaw, you could cut off your leg, right? So I is automatically a global variable. What it means is it's the same I up here. So yeah, I was 0 a moment ago, but then it's a global variable that's shared in the scope of this helper method. And so at the end of this helper method, I was actually 3 because it went 0, 1, 2 through the elements of that row, and then it went 3. And so now we're down here, and it's going to go increment 3, which is going to become 4, which is actually going to cause us to break out of this loop. And so we only ever went through the first row. Okay? So the problem is that that I is a global variable. All right, so let me show you how to fix this. It's very, very simple fix. You just have to get into the habit. Well, of course, you could use a different variable name for this. I mean, often we use J to refer to a column. So let me just check. I mean, that should fix it. So I don't want to break this anymore. Let me just run it. So that should fix it. Yeah, so I get the number 78, which seems better. If I look at these numbers, it's the numbers 1 through 12 in sequence. If you know your triangular numbers, that should be 12 times 13 over 2, which is indeed 78. Okay, so fine. I mean, changing the variable name solves the problem, but there's kind of a deeper issue here. I want you to get in the habit of not using global variables. We want to try to avoid that because of problems like this. It's very important to have the scopes constrained. So a better way to deal with this is to use the keyword let. And so what let will do is it makes it a variable in this scope only. So I should really do it with all the variables that I declare, all the local variables that I declare in a method. And actually, if I try to then declare another variable later here, if I were to say let sum equals 10, it'll throw an error. It won't even let me do that. It'll say redeclaration of sum. So it's like a syntax check for you to realize that you've already defined that variable. So now I can use the same name, but I'm in a different method. And so the let keeps me in that scope. And so this will work just fine also. See, that ran. Okay. And I can even go and add that other row. So I can even go and add 13, 14, 15. And this will run just fine. This gives me 120, which again should be 15 times 16 over 2. We got it, 120. Now, but let me go back for a second because I just want to show you why the infinite loop. Right? So this was the thing I got really stuck with a student on. So I'll go back to doing the bad thing. Let me first set a breakpoint though, so I don't lock up here. So if I go and set a breakpoint, now I'll save this and it'll refresh. Okay, so it's set a breakpoint here. Now hopefully you can see what's going to happen. If I, let's see, where's my step thing? If I step over this method, so remember at the end of I is always going to be 3 after it calls this helper method, right? Here I'm trying to get through 5 rows. So this will increment to 4, it'll sum the row, but then I will be 3 again. And then it'll increment to 4, and it'll... So I will never get to 5, which is the condition for breaking out of the loop when there are 5 rows. So this method keeps resetting it to 3. And so if you have... what's the easiest way to say this? If you have 2 more rows than columns, then you're going to go into an infinite loop. If you have 3 more rows than columns, you're going to go into an infinite loop. So if the gap between if the number of rows and columns is at least 2, and there's more rows than columns, then this will throw an infinite loop. So anyway, I just wanted to share that, an important thing to be aware of. And the upshot is just get into the habit of using let. That's all you need to do. Okay? So just to make sure you paid attention, I'm going to have you fix this on the next page. And hopefully we'll never run into this. Okay.